we teach leaders about brains and how they work. We teach neuroscience to people, supporting leadership teams all around the world. And I guess really today, although we've got that very deep, lean TPS knowledge and experience, we're really a people development company because we focus on, you know, the Japanese got that term hitozukuri that sits behind the strategy deployment approach they use, Hoshinkanri. And that's what we're all about. We're about getting, if you get the people bit right, everything else seems to fall into place. But all the time looking for the profit, you keep upsetting the people. So we're reversing the tables, and that's what we're doing. As Philip Holt from GK and Aerospace said when we were working with those guys, he said, you've codified emotion so even engineers and accountants can understand why they're important to get right. So that's kind of what we're doing. And BTFA is that. It's neuroscience in a box. So it really simplifies a very complex subject so everybody can get it very easily. And then once we teach leadership teams a bit more about that, how it works, it completely changes your view of what good looks like and how to approach running a business, running a project, running a change program, deploying strategy, whatever else it might be that you have to do to create a high performance culture that's going to sustain change and weather out the storms. Like you said, we're in unprecedented times and it's a difficult time to be in business. If you're going to have a business like we've seen with Toyota as a great example that stands, you know, head and shoulders above many, it comes down to culture, and culture comes down to leadership, behavior, conduct, beliefs, and beliefs are fundamentally the way your brain has been imprinted to fire and how it's wired. And if we don't really get that bit, we make a lot of mistakes in our approach. So
it's you're saying you go back to nature and nurture. You're saying you can actually change the way people think and behave and act.
Yeah. What we're seeing is people saying, "Oh, since I've been through BTFA with you guys, I'm now a much more resilient person." It builds people's confidence because they accept themselves for how they're designed to function. They recognize and see the patterns of response when it comes to fear-based responses, and they start to recognize what stress triggers look like in the work environment and can therefore target the reduction of those stress triggers so that people's brains are in a better position to be able to change, rather than accepting everything we do that is a stress trigger has to remain the same because it's systematized, it's part of the culture, it's part of the belief system, and then saying, oh, but on top of that, we want you to change. And it's when you look at it through the brain lens, you go, oh, well, that's ridiculous. People can't change if they're under this time pressure or under the stress of not being able to pay the bills or, you know, whatever else it might be. So, yeah, it does make a profound difference. And we're seeing, you know, even exec teams who have been butting heads for years repair relationships because they get to week 3 of what we take them through and they go, look how silly our brains are being. You know, why are we doing this to ourselves and each other? Let's just start getting along, because they can understand how they can facilitate the shift in their thinking.
It's fairly simple. And does every business, in your opinion, have the similar issues that you've seen in your working career?
Do you know, insofar as if you employ people and they've got a brain, then yes.
So that's yes then.
That's a yes then, yeah. And it's those mistakes that we make on the people front around the human factors, if you like, that inhibit change programs, slow progress down. And ultimately, it all comes back down to a fear-based response. There's a system between brain and body called the HPA axis, and it goes from the thalamus to the hypothalamus to the pituitary gland to the adrenal glands on top of your kidneys, and that's all part of that fight-flight process. You know, you've got ACTH as a precursor to cortisol and then adrenaline, and you know all the different chemicals that change the way you feel, which is the F part of BTFA, and that fear-based response that we all know and experience and all suffer from, if you want to put it like that, deeply imprinted in childhood, right? So it happens in our formative years, and it's fundamentally a response to a fear of failure or rejection. So that kind of imposed control from an authority figure is eat your greens, sit on the naughty step till you learn how to speak to me politely, you know, whatever it might be. It's imposed control. Yeah, and we haven't really got the language register in our brains at that point to describe it. So it's an emotional experience we can't ever verbalize. And so when we get into adulthood, that wiring and firing pattern's still there somewhere buried deep in the back of our brains. when the right amount of stimulus from the environment, from our boss, from the authority figure, or from the system that imposes control, whether that be through judgment mechanisms, policy, KPIs, if we've not been involved in establishing that and we haven't had agency over our own outcomes, then that can start to trigger that emotional response. So you're shutting the brain down because it changes the way the glucose energy works in the brain at that point in time. That doesn't allow you to work optimally. So you're not able to function at your best, and therefore you're not able to contribute the best to the organization. So it seems pretty obvious that if we're going to conduct ourselves as leaders in ways which subconsciously send a signal to the brain that says you're in a position where you're exposed to control by an authority figure, and so you need to have this fear-based response because you're not approved of, you're not valued, you're not worthy. And that's reinforced by the way we run the P&L and see people as a cost. And, when we got to make cost reductions, we make headcount reductions, and all the signals in the world say we're not valuable. And the one thing the human brain needs is to feel valued as part of the herd and to belong to something and have purpose and direction. So when we feel like we're making progress towards an outcome objective together, it releases the right chemicals in the brain like dopamine, which give us that intrinsic motivation and keep us moving forward together. And we just get that part of it all wrong. We're unaware of the psychology and the neuroscience. And because of that, we impose targets, we impose goals, we impose KPIs, thinking that because we're the boss, we have to know best, when often we don't. And so our own insecurities and defense mechanisms cut in, and we just create toxic cultures ultimately, and we can do so much better once we've got this knowledge.
Absolutely. And you talk about business leaders. Business leaders tend to micromanage. If you've got a really good team, you just need to let them do their job, don't you?
Yeah. One of those principles is letting go, right? And it's one of the things that the Japanese used to call Westerners concrete heads. It's like, why can't you see that you need to let go and give people agency? Psychologically, it's self-determination theory. It's all these different principles that says if somebody can make their mind up about which direction they want to go in and they can make progress towards that, they're going to feel good about themselves. Now we've got the neuroscience to back up that theory. So we can't question it anymore. That's exactly what happens because of the way we release dopamine and the way that acts as part of our motivation and seeking mechanisms. So, when it comes even just coming to goal setting, if you understand enough about the neuroscience, it tells you have to be inclusive in your approach and to give, not to include people by telling them what decision you've made. Include people by giving them a chance to have a voice because their opinion's valued, and to listen actually and take it on board and let that, where necessary, inform the strategy so they know they've been heard. And they feel part of the business. If we get that kind of stuff right, oh my goodness, the performance goes through the roof because you're improving relationship at that point. People are connecting genuinely as human to human, and they collaborate better, they innovate more because of the way the chemicals shift in their brain and where the glucose energy can be utilized in the prefrontal cortex. And there's all this, I say the science just backs up the common sense really, but
fantastic. And you talk about moving forward. We're halfway through the year. What does the rest of 2024 hold for you, your team, your business? Where are you going?
I think really I would like to just, and this is probably why we're talking, I'd love to be able to do more in the UK and support UK PLC, an SME, knowing that it used to be the old statistics were 93% of GDP come from SMEs. I'm not sure if that's still about the same. If that's the case, then how can we share what we've learned at this international global level in corporates and bring it to the party and help all of those guys running your 10, 20, 30 million turnover companies out there benefit from what we've laboured long and hard to learn, through blood, sweat and tears. And if we can share it in the UK, that would be a nice part of our forward-going strategy, I think.
Absolutely. And that is why you're here, David, so we can spread the word on what you do. Fascinating to hear the work you do, the journey you're on. Thank you for your time, and we'll catch up soon.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, David.